those of us who suffered his verbal abuse at school. And that, by the way, is not just anti-Semitic verbal abuse, but just to sort of like really nail this. It was towards Asian kids, Black British kids, and anyone who wasn't white, really, and anyone who was Jewish, obviously.
In a political landscape overflowing with noise, every now and then a moment breaks through, sharp, undeniable, and impossible to ignore. And what you're about to witness is exactly that. A man who stayed silent for decades is finally stepping forward, confronting a chapter of his past that Nigel Farage has spent years downplaying, denying, and trying to bury. Before we jump in, tell me where you're tuning in from, and remember to like and subscribe. Your support helps the channel grow and keeps these stories coming. Now, let's get into it. The man Nigel Farage, once accused of tormenting him with racist and anti-Semitic abuse at school, has decided he will no longer remain quiet. After years of watching Farage rise through the ranks of public life, shaping national conversations, influencing elections, and presenting himself as a champion of British values, this former classmate has reached a breaking point. In a deeply emotional and remarkably composed interview, he sits down with James O'Brien to finally speak under his own name. No anonymity, no hiding, no euphemisms. Just a man who knows the truth of what happened in those school corridors, stepping forward to warn the country about the character of someone now vying for power. And make no mistake, this is precisely the kind of story Farage and his political allies hoped would never see the light of day. For years, they've relied on charm, bravado, and strategic deflection to keep these allegations out of the national spotlight. But today, that silence is broken. His voice carries the weight of experience, and his testimony cuts sharply through the polished media persona Farage has cultivated. This isn't gossip. This isn't political theater. This is lived history resurfacing at the exact moment Farage wants Britain to trust him with even more influence. So let's watch this unfold together. And as always, I'll share my thoughts at the end.
We did meet
in
March 2019.
We were both participating in an event. You just published your book.
That's right.
I just made a film, and we were introduced. And somehow, I don't quite know how, we got onto the subject of Brexit and Nigel Farage. And I told you my recollections of Farage at school.
Of all the things that you have now recollected rather more publicly, the gas chamber sound effects, the Hitler was right comments. And all the rest of it. It's extremely well documented. And I suppose the first question I have to ask you, Peter, is why have you decided to come forward in your own name?
Well, I had come forward in my own name before. When Michael Crick did his original report, I declined any involvement with that because I just kind of thought at that time, this is 2013, I kind of thought, well, I mean, it was awful, but it's years later, and I didn't feel I could put my head above the parapet. I didn't think anyone would corroborate what had happened to me. So, I kind of backed away from that. But then Michael came back to me when he was writing his biography of Farage.
Oh, yes, of course.
During COVID, and we had a long conversation about Farage, and he quoted me both on and off the record. I still didn't feel in any way comfortable about owning in my name the worst of the comments. And what struck me both after the 2013 report and around the time of the biography was the way that Farage would sort of shrug it off as banter, which is of course the last refuge of anybody. He has this sort of stock in trade of the cheeky chappy and I'm just a bit of a disruptor and a wind-up, a merchant and all of that, and don't believe anything. But of course, those of us who suffered his verbal abuse at school, and that, by the way, is not just anti-Semitic verbal abuse, but just to sort of really nail this. It was towards Asian kids, Black British kids, and anyone who wasn't white, really, and anyone who was Jewish, obviously. I felt so embittered, enraged by the denials, the repeated denials, that I didn't hesitate when The Guardian got in touch with me, because this is not about me necessarily coming forward and saying I want to tell my story. This is about the Guardian's initial incredibly well-researched article, and balanced article as well. I mean, they took the trouble to quote people who don't remember Farage being abusive. And representing him in all his colours. He could be very charming, as you probably know. He can be, you can share a laugh with the guy. But I just really didn't hesitate at that point, because I thought that the motive that The Guardian were doing, which was to say, look, is this person who said these things and then denied them a fit person to be our Prime Minister? I think that's a very good question, and so that's why I didn't hesitate to get involved. Sorry, very long answer to your question.
Take all the time you want, Peter. I always do. But I've
noticed.
So the complexion of the country has changed since you spoke to me in 2019, and the prospect of him becoming Prime Minister has changed the context of the experience, the whole encounter, the whole history of interactions. Do you have any regrets given the response that has unfolded? I mean, just in the last week, do you ever think, why have I done this? Why?
There have been moments. It's a bit of a roller coaster ride,
of course,
doing something like this. I'm very thankful that I've had some experience of media and junkets and everything else while promoting films, because I don't think I think I'd been entirely out of my depth otherwise.
Yeah.
But there's obviously a sort of like an emotional and psychological aspect to speaking up like this. I mean, I don't have. Obviously, The Guardian, The Times, BBC News. I've spoken to them all. They've been fantastic sort of in getting the story out. So, of course I have their support. I don't have any lawyers. I don't have any spokespeople. I don't have any PR people working in my court, which I think probably Nigel Farage does. I did actually get contacted by a crisis management PR company the other day, and I sort of said, I think actually you should probably be talking to Nigel Farage,
this isn't
not
my
me.
Crisis. Yes, I hear you. I'm going to read you a message from one of my listeners that came in earlier today when I mentioned that you would be joining us. He says, imagine being bullied in such a hideous way. This is from Kevin. And then having to see your bully every day in the media, creeping about like some scheming modern-day Uriah Heep-style parasite, and then finding the strength that it takes to face up to this vile history of lies and to go public with what you know. I have huge respect for you, Peter. That's from Kevin. He's not alone. Quite a few people have made that point today. That's, of course, not why you did it. You did it, in a sense, not to bring the spotlight down on yourself, but to shift it back to him. You mentioned lawyers, which is interesting. I'm going to play you a clip, I know you've heard it before, of Richard Tice being interviewed on the Today programme yesterday by Emma Barnett. A Jewish woman who, of course, Farage elected yesterday to call lower grade. You can make of that what you will, but just let me remind you of this.
You've just said that a man who's in his own right a director and producer, he's not a political operative, you've just said he's lying.
Yes.
But you don't know that. So you're lying within your lie, potentially.
No, I just don't think. I think this is made up twaddle by a whole bunch of people
He said
with
it
a
for
political
years,
axe.
and he has witnesses.
I think these people have a political axe to grind. And do you know, every week the voters are going out in by-elections and they're voting for reform because they're not buying into this sort of left-wing anti-Nigel narrative.
And that's extraordinary. And that might be a moment when you might think about calling lawyers.
I have actually been called by lawyers and said, look, you've got a case for defamation, for suing him for defamation here. This was before Mr. Tice yesterday.
Gosh.
I kind of feel a bit sorry for Mr. Tice. I mean, he was kind of thrown under the bus by Nigel Farage.
Sending him out to defend him when he was still in hiding himself.
Yes, and then I believe sort of like refusing to endorse Mr. Tice's comments in his own press conference yesterday.
Yeah.
I mean, here's my feeling about all of this. I know I'm telling the truth. There are now, in the initial reporting, there were 20 people, many of whom corroborated my story and added to experience of their own. That number has now risen to 28. I'm jokingly referring to them as the Dulwich 28. So, we are, by the way, we have not been in touch with each other, and certainly not before any of the initial reporting was done. And so all of this testimony has been independently sourced. it would be an amazing operation if it really was a conspiracy to smear. A quite remarkable operation, and I don't think any of us is up for that. So it's not a lie. The repeated attempts to sort of smear us as liars or kind of diminish what we experienced and also diminish the anger that we all feel with Farage going out and continuing to deny things. I think that's why we're here.
Indeed, continuing to deny things, although it's becoming increasingly hard to know what he's denying and what he's passing off as sort of Bernard Manning-like commentary or as inoffensive racism or somehow whatever that is, or inoffensive anti-Semitism. So the first line of his response to us last week was, "I can tell you categorically that I did not say the things that have been published in The Guardian, aged 13, nearly 50 years ago." Just for clarification, it wasn't just when he was 13.
No,
a lot of this stuff went on well into the sixth form.
I mean, you know, I was really struck by the reporting because for me it was a personal experience that was really concentrated in my first year when we sat next to each other basically in class. And as soon as he found out, well, as soon as he heard my surname, Etegi, and found out that I had Jewish heritage, he was on my case for the rest of the year. And initially it was shocking and brutal. I mean, I'd never experienced any kind of prejudice before, really. I haven't really experienced it since then.
Good.
So you know, yeah, it was pretty hideous.
Did you tell your parents?
You know, I didn't.
Okay.
And I've kind of like been asked about this before, and I kind of thought, well, maybe what was going on there? And I think, you know, my parents had built a business up from nothing. And they had really saved hard and invested a great deal in the education of myself and my brother, which included sending us to Dulwich. And I kind of think that there must have been some sort of like aspect of me not wanting to sort of let down all that work that I knew at the time that they'd done.
Yeah.
And I knew that I was very privileged to be going to that school, and that was due to their hard work. So I didn't talk to them about it until much, much, much later. And yeah, so I didn't.
What do you want Farage to do now? What I mean, what I don't know if the word satisfy is appropriate in this context.
You know, I suppose that, as I say, I and many others came forward because of the denials and the sort of like starting off once upon a time telling me to go to gas chambers, and now in the modern era kind of gaslighting us, I guess.
Yeah.
And I suppose my big thing was that I wanted that to be out there. What he did with it is not really my concern, I have to say.
Yes.
I mean, you know, if now, having done all of these denials, he suddenly has a sort of Damascene conversion and remembers everything and says, "Oh, I'm really sorry," well, I guess it would satisfy a lot of people and think, "Good on you, Nigel, you've done the right thing there." But would I believe that that was a sincere apology? I'm not sure. So, as I say, I'm not really that bothered. I think it would be great if he kind of came out and said that any anti-Semitic abuse, any racist abuse and prejudice against your fellow citizens is a vile and terrible thing and to be condemned. I think it would be fantastic if he said something like that. But
a bit tricky for him, given what he's, you know, his associations with people like Andrew Tate and comments about them being part of a similar phenomenon. But
yes.
would it just on an emotional level, if he accepted that your memories are accurate, would that mean anything to you, or are you? I sense you might have moved on from that.
I've moved way on from that. I mean, as I said to you earlier, I was concerned that initially that if I spoke up, I wouldn't be believed. It would be my word against his. No one would corroborate me. Now I've had so much corroboration from.
You're a bit surprised by the scale of this. I think
I'm totally surprised by it.
Why?
Because I didn't realise it was being clocked in the way it was. It was sort of so, you know, it was so personal and directed, I felt, at me. I heard that sort of thing, but I didn't think that anyone would necessarily step up. And I didn't want to put pressure on the one or two people that I knew from that time and ask them to support me if they didn't actually do it voluntarily. So I think over the past 3 or 4 weeks, I've been absolutely overwhelmed by the extent of the corroboration and also just the general response, the email that you read out a little bit earlier.
There's a lot of that coming.
I've had so many of those. And I've had, the other thing that I would say is a lot of people saying thank you for speaking out. And they're saying thank you because they're scared. They're scared of what Britain might become in the hands of someone like Nigel Farage.
I think a lot of us are. 4 minutes after 12, I just reiterate that apology for the two of the words. Obviously, we're both very sorry if you are offended by that.
I apologise as well.
Thank you, Peter. A quick word on some of the interview Richard Tice gave yesterday. That line we just heard about it being some sort of political conspiracy. I'm going to presume, I went to public school as well, that Dulwich College is not in the habit of turning out lefties, legions of lefties. If it is, there might be some parents who are currently considering applying for a refund.
Absolutely, and I find it extraordinary that Dulwich College has been silent through all of this.
Yes, of course.
Someone was telling me the other day that he was actually president of the Old Elanian Golf Club. I don't know if that's true or not, by the way, but I was told. So he and that he still does have links to the school, and I'm surprised that the school have said nothing. What I would say, if I may, is that, the people who have all come out and talked and given their testimony, they are doctors working in the NHS. They are scientists. They work in like me in entertainment, in finance, in the law. Some are in politics, and I think that we all came out of Dulwich in the 1970s and moved into the 80s and the 90s, and we were all part of building a new kind of Britain, a much more perhaps tolerant, diverse Britain, but one where there was genuine opportunity, and we've all kind of like become part of communities, built our own families, and it's very distressing to think, that we might be dragged back to the 70s, to that era where, as Farage pointed out yesterday, there were comedians like Bernard Manning. I kind of think the sort of racist and misogynistic language of some of those comedians, it's very apt that he picked on Bernard Manning. I think that kind of prejudice is becoming normalised again. People are feeling less scared about name-calling.
Yes, I mean, which I suppose leads us, and finally, to the front page of the Daily Mail this morning, which has accused or claimed that the Reform UK leader has turned the tables on the BBC by citing It Ain't Half Hot, Mum, in the context of the...
I mean, come on, this is so rich. Without the BBC, Farage would be nothing.
That's true.
I mean, I think he has to take the rough with the smooth. The BBC have been more than fair in giving him a platform on Question Time and generally on TV. And I know this because whenever he has come on TV, and I love Question Time, but whenever I saw him on Question Time, I had to switch the TV off because his voice, his posture, he is so exactly... reminds me today of the Farage that said those things.
It's triggering
back then.
The modern word, triggering, but...
The modern word is indeed triggering. I think we have to be careful about using such woke terms, James.
Of course we do, Peter. Of that we can all happily agree. Here is the response to the allegations that Nigel Farage gave us last week. I can tell you categorically that I did not say the things that have been published in The Guardian aged 13 nearly 50 years ago, so nothing about the things that Peter says he did aged 18. But Farage goes on, isn't it interesting? I'm probably the most scrutinised figure in British politics, having been in public life for 32 years. Several books and thousands of stories have been written about me, but it is only now that my party is leading in the poll that these allegations come out. Again, I mean, that's... not true. That's not me expressing an opinion, that's me counting. I will leave the public to draw their own conclusions about why that might be. Can you draw conclusions about things that aren't true? I don't know, except perhaps about the person telling the untruths. We know that The Guardian wants to smear anybody who talks about the immigration issue, do we? But the truth is that I have done more in my career to defeat extremism. This is brilliant. The truth is I have done more in my career to defeat extremism and far-right politics than anybody else in the UK, from my time fighting the BNP right up to today. Many of those making these statements just happen to be political opponents. One, for example, is the current chair of the Salisbury Lib Dems. This is not the first time the desperate establishment has come after me, and it will not be the last. So again, I can categorically say that the stories being told about me from 50 years ago are not true. Which makes it all the odder then that he spent yesterday shouting about it ain't half Hot Mum and Bernard Manning. But hey-ho.
And there it is, laid out in full view. What we just witnessed wasn't anger, wasn't theatrics, and wasn't some political stunt. It was the voice of a man who chose dignity over silence, someone who stepped forward not because he wanted attention, but because he sees a familiar figure inching closer to real political power. A man who remembers what Farage was like long before the TV studios, long before the rallies, long before the reinvention of the cheeky outsider. He spoke because he recognizes the stakes. When someone who caused deep harm in the past rises unchecked, the people who lived through that harm feel a responsibility to warn others, and that's precisely what we saw. Not revenge, not bitterness, but a clear moral instinct to confront the truth before it slips away entirely. And here's the part that should trouble anyone paying attention. While Farage remains tucked away, avoiding scrutiny, he sends out Richard, Tice to the BBC to dismiss a victim of racist and anti-Semitic abuse as a liar. There's no compassion, no attempt to understand, no effort to separate politics from basic human decency. Just an immediate, aggressive reflex to discredit someone who dared to speak. What does that reveal about the culture around him? What does it say about the instincts of the party he leads? And then Peter drops the detail that changes everything. The number of former classmates. Coming forward hasn't stayed at 20, it's jumped to 28. 28 individuals stepping out of their own lives to say, yes, this happened. And it happened to more than one person. Peter calls them the Dulwich 28, and that name already carries weight. Because this isn't one man's memory against one politician's denial. It's a chorus. A community of witnesses. Farage is trying to wave away as some carefully orchestrated political plot. But look at who these people are. Doctors, scientists, barristers, professionals working in fields where credibility matters. These aren't anonymous social media accounts. They're not activists. And they're certainly not part of some mythical left-wing machine. They are ordinary people who built their lives around honesty and service. And they're saying the same thing. And perhaps the most striking moment is when Peter makes it clear he doesn't even need an apology. He isn't asking Farage to bow his head or admit guilt. All he wants is the bare minimum, for Farage to simply say that racist and anti-Semitic abuse is wrong. That's it. Just a basic moral principle. And yet even that, after all this time, remains something Farage has conspicuously avoided. So now the question turns to you. What does this say about leadership? About accountability? About the Britain we want to be? Share your thoughts in the comments. I genuinely want to hear what you make of all this. And if this breakdown helped you understand the story a bit more clearly, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for future analysis. Thank you for watching.